Everyone wants to live an inspired life, yet so many people search for happiness following the footsteps of peers and taking advice from people who have different values and outcomes to which they're searching. There are people born into wealth, graduated from the best universities in the world, and there are people who have none of that and yet are living extraordinary lives full of fulfillment and reward. The purpose of this podcast is to share insights and strategies that allow you to question the status quo and think freely, so you can design your life and be who you want to be. We get one life. Time is our most valuable asset. I believe that when we're free and able to focus on meaningful work, we become better human beings. This is Always Free, and I'm your host, Jason Graystone.
Welcome to the leading podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with Jason on social media and subscribe to the Jason Graystone YouTube channel for weekly videos. Don't forget to also subscribe to the weekly newsletter to receive frequent educational content and action steps to help you design your life so you can be who you want to be. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, guys. Hope you've all had a nice week. If you're listening to this for the first time, this is the number one podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. And if you're listening to this episode, and this is the first episode you've listened to, go back to the beginning and start at episode 1, because I've kind of gone through every episode in order just so that there's a strategy underlying throughout the theme of the podcast, and each episode has been specifically crafted in a specific order for a specific reason to get the best result. So if you're listening to this one, I highly recommend you go back to number 1 and start there. But had a couple of weeks off because we're moving into a new house. And if it sounds a little bit echoey, it's because there's not much furniture in my office. But I didn't want to miss another week because it's been a couple of weeks due to the move. So I thought I'd get this one out. And based on all of the conversations I've been having and all of the kind of general theme of conversation around 2020 and some of the messages I've been getting, I wanted to talk a little bit about planning again and planning for 2020, because I know I've done a podcast on planning before, and I kind of gave you a strategy on how, like an overview of how I plan, but I wanted to just talk a little bit about why it's important to plan and some of the mindset shifts that you're going to need to adopt, and some hurdles that might get in your way, and some stuff that might cause you not to plan, and things that will hold you back if you listen to that. You know, that if you let that get under your skin, it's going to stop you actually planning. So I want to talk a little bit about that. But first of all, you know, how quickly has the year gone? It just seems like yesterday it was Christmas. And, you know, the years just seem to fly by, and you think that you're going to do all this stuff in a year. Many people put all these plans or have all these plans, and before they know it, the year's gone, which is exactly why last night we had our second intake of the Tears of Freedom program. We took in 26 new members, and on the 20th of December, next week, I'm going to be hosting a life planning workshop, very detailed workshop for the members in London, where I'm going to be showcasing a new planning tool that I've been developing over the years, and I'm going to be giving it to them so that they can plan 2020 and make it the best year ever for them. But the reason that's such a high demand is because people are realizing that the 12 months isn't that long, you know, and 12 months really can have a big impact on your life if you spend that 12 months wisely, okay? Or it can just fly by. So I wanted to give you some perspective in this podcast, because let's just say that we live till about 80 or 90, okay? Give or take 10 years. So we're born at 0, we live till 80 or 90, and we've got 8 or 9 decades. Now, the first part of your life, obviously, you're just learning to walk and talk and learning new things at school. And then about 19 or 20, you're thrown into the workforce. And then, of course, for most people, it's work up until they retire at 65 or maybe 75 years old. And obviously, that's just an average. You know, some people work a bit longer, some people work less, but it's just an average. And some people live longer lives and some people live shorter lives. But I think on record, the oldest person has lived to 120 years old. But just for the simplicity of this podcast, let's just go on average. Let's just say between 80 and 90. So I'm going to leave out the first 20 years because that's mainly compulsory self-development. That's school and education and, really finding your feet. And I'm also going to leave out the last 5 years because typically that's where people, unfortunately, tragically, have lost the kind of zest for life. So at that age, they feel like that it's basically waiting for death's door. So that kind of gives you around 50 years. So between 50 and 70, that gives you about 50 years. So you've essentially got 50 years to do everything that you want to do in life, discover your purpose, travel the world, write a book, make a difference, see the change that you want in the world. And you might be thinking, well, 50 years, that's not too bad. But I want to kind of give you some perspective on that because first of all, you spend about 8 hours a day sleeping. Okay, so that's 33% of that 50 years right off the bat that you've spent completely unconscious. That's 17 years completely unconscious. You're asleep. Okay, and then there's preparing and eating meals. That takes up to around 2 hours of your day. So that can take another 4.2 years off of your life. And then there's time spent in the bathroom grooming and shaving and showering and brushing your teeth and using the toilet. And that takes another 1.77 years off of that total. So now in total, that's 22 and a half years, already half of the allotted time already gone. And we've only gone as far as performing the most basic bodily functions. So you might be thinking, well, that's not so bad because I've got 27 years left. All right, well, let's talk about work. The average person spends about 40 hours per week, and that's without overtime or doing the extra bit at home to hit deadlines. That equates to about another 10 to 11 years. Let's call it 10 and a half years because people tend to retire around 65 if they're lucky. But they're commuting back and forward, sitting in traffic jams, going from A to B. So that means we've lost another 3 years commuting. So that's 13 and a half years performing work-related tasks, going back and forward to work for the privilege of being able to do so simply in order to sustain ourselves and pay for our own existence so that then we can go back to work. So when you add all that up, that leaves about 14 years. But we're not finished there because you spend about an hour a day maintaining your home and lifestyle, taking out the bins, mowing the lawn, vacuuming, dusting, exercising, school run, all that kind of stuff. And we all have to do that. And that's 2.1 years right there. And then there's another 90 minutes a day spent keeping your friendships, your community, relationships, looking after your kids, playing with them, speaking to your wife and your husband, caring for relatives. You might even spend time in worship, okay? And that means you just have now under 9 years left. And then there's television, right? That show you're addicted to, games on your phone, scrolling through Facebook, Twitter feed, Instagram, text messaging, Snapchat, WhatsApp, all that, okay? In this day and age, we are subjected to an incredible amount of distraction via digital media. And it's not uncommon for people to spend 2.5 hours per day on those types of pursuits. So you could look at your screen time on your phone and I guarantee it will be around 2.5 hours. All right. And if it isn't, the TV and all the rest of it will make up for that 2.5 hours. So just that alone could take nearly 5.5 years off of your life. And I don't think I've really covered everything here. So let's just consider this is an optimistic estimate. So what do we have left? 3.5 years. 3.5 years is the time that you have to go on holidays, see the world, discover new places, find out who you really are, work on you, okay? Ultimately discover your true calling, your values, your purpose, and answer all the questions you've always wanted answered. That's the time that you have to do that thing that you've been wanting to do but have never found the time to do it. Maybe you're waiting for the kids to be older. Maybe you're waiting for a better job or a better income. And as that time goes on, you just find yourself moving the goalposts further and further. But once the time's gone, it's gone. It's gone forever. It's never, ever coming back. And I'm not trying to say this to scare you, but I just want to give you some food for thought and maybe put a bit of a fire in your belly. And hopefully this will encourage you to finally go and do that thing in 2020. All right, maybe it's time to find a significant change in your life. you're going to be spending 50 years of your life working. So you really need to ask yourself, do you really enjoy what you do? Are you following your passion in life, or is there a little room for a readjustment here? So that's kind of it on kind of giving you a bit of an attaboy for 2020. But one of the most tragic things I see is people not wanting to make a change because of opinions of others, and how the change, people might not like the change, and people might speak about you. And people also seem to have this thing in their head that they don't like change, right? They don't like change. And I've heard people say, I don't like today's society. I don't like what people are today. And what they're doing is all they're doing is comparing today to what they know growing up, which is in the past. And they don't like that uncertainty of not knowing. They don't like the fear of people changing. And it's always been that way. I remember reading about when Elvis came out on the scene, and he was swiveling his hips and he was called the devil and all that. And then later on, all the kids are raving about him and they want to be him, and cutting their hair like him. And it's just this ongoing thing that people adapt to. And what you also have to understand is there's equal benefits and drawbacks to everything. Like literally everything. If you're searching for something to be better, or like this is better than that, or that's better than this, there's always going to be equal benefits and drawbacks to everything. For example, I encourage you to think about a recent thing that you've bought, or something you've acquired, or something you've achieved where you thought that it would be better to have that. And then what I want you to do is think about all of the drawbacks of having that, and the changes, the things you don't have now. Okay, like we've just moved into a new house, so you could say, oh, the house is so much better, right? But there's going to be things about this house that the other house had that this one hasn't got, and things that this one has got that the other one hasn't got. And there's always an equal amount of benefits and drawbacks. So the reason I mention this is because people search for planning for things that they feel are going to be better, okay? But you have to embrace the fact that there's going to be challenges along with those plans as well. And the reason I want to tell you this is because it stops people making plans. Because when they make plans, they feel like they're just going for something better. And although their life might be enhanced through the process, there's always going to be challenges and hurdles that you're going to face. And if you're not ready for them, you're not prepared for them, you're going to become discouraged. You're going to feel like giving up. And when people start injecting their opinions onto you, you're going to start feeling doubtful, and you're not going to stick to your plan. But I look at it this way. I think that humans always want certainty, but they also search for uncertainty. Because imagine if you knew what every day of your life was going to look like. So when you woke up in the morning, the next day, what your kids were going to look like, and all the rest of it. I've said this before. Your life would be pretty boring, because it would be like Groundhog Day. The only reason that today has any meaning for us is because tomorrow is uncertain. Because we don't know, because we're excited and we're seeking uncertainty, that's why today has meaning for us. If we knew what tomorrow was going to look like, and the next day and the next day and the next day, we wouldn't have any meaning. We wouldn't have any value. I hope this episode has kind of given you a bit of a fire in the belly to get stuck into 2020 and really made you get some perspective on your life and how valuable time is. But just before we go, another bit of perspective is I want you to go onto Amazon and order the biggest yearly planner that you can find for 2020 and pin it on your wall. There's one that they do that's an A1, and there's one that they do that's an AO size. Get it, have it delivered to your house in the next couple of days, and stick it on your wall just so you can stare 2020 in the face. When you do that, when you can see the whole year laid out like that, you can really get perspective on how much time there is, but also how little time there is. And you can effectively start blocking in those most important plans of yours. Put you in first, be selfish, put your stuff in first, yours, your family's, your purpose, and everything else will fit around that. Everything else will work its way around that, and you'll work it out. So that's really it for this episode, guys. If you're interested in learning more about these philosophies and principles, and you're interested in the Tears of Freedom program, you can go over and apply for that on bit.ly/Jason bit.ly/Tears of Freedom survey. And you can also join the Facebook group, which is tearsoffreedom.com/mastermind. And until next time, have a great rest of your day and weekend, and I'll see you then.
Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.